All right, today we're diving into a massive idea, one that weaves together some really deep, ancient philosophy with some pretty wild, cutting-edge science. We're talking about the theory that consciousness is non-local. So let's just start by questioning the one thing we all take for granted.
I mean, really think about it. It feels like it is, right? We experience our thoughts, our feelings, our entire sense of self right here, kind of behind our eyes. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle, and consciousness isn't actually stuck inside our skulls?
See, this is what's so fascinating. When you hear modern scientists, neuroscientists, researchers exploring the nature of the mind start talking about non-local consciousness, you might think it's a brand new idea. But they're actually stepping into a huge debate that's been going on for centuries, especially in Buddhist philosophy. They're asking the exact same questions, just, with a different vocabulary.
To kind of set the mood here, let's look at this line from the ancient Lotus Sutra. Now, it's not a direct answer, of course, but it's a really profound hint. It suggests that the true nature of reality isn't something you can just work out with pure logic. It's something that's revealed when one awakened mind can truly see another. It's this relational, almost resonant idea, which kind of suggests consciousness might not be some isolated thing happening in your head. So, how did these ancient thinkers tackle this? Well, one of the first big attempts came from a school called Yogācāra, and their answer was, wow, it was totally radical, and honestly, it sounds surprisingly modern. They basically said the world as we know it is, at its core, mind. And the way they thought this worked is just fascinating. They had this concept called the storehouse consciousness. The best way to think about it is like this deep, vast, underlying level of your mind. And it holds all these karmic imprints, these seeds from all of your past actions. It's this deep consciousness that then filters and literally projects everything we think of as the outside world.
So here's the kicker. For the Yogācāra school, our reality is completely mind-dependent. It's a projection. And that lines up so well with these modern ideas that consciousness isn't just a side effect of brain chemistry, but that it's actively participating in a much bigger field.
But, of course, that leads to a really tough follow-up question. Okay, so if our whole world is just a projection from this huge storehouse consciousness, what is that consciousness? Is it some kind of ultimate fundamental stuff that everything is made of?
And this is where things get really interesting. Another major school of thought, Madhyamaka, steps onto the stage and throws a huge wrench into the whole idea with a really powerful challenge. And this slide really lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you have Yogācāra saying, the world is a projection of mind. But then Madhyamaka fires back with something even more radical. Yeah, but even the mind itself, that so-called storehouse consciousness, it's also empty. It has no essential, independent nature of its own. Now, that word emptiness can be super tricky. It doesn't mean nothingness, like a void. It means that everything, a rock, a tree, a thought, even consciousness itself, doesn't have any fixed, independent, permanent itness. Things exist, for sure, but they aren't solid, self-contained objects. They're more like processes. The brilliant Madhyamaka philosopher Nagarjuna, he basically argued that if you just replace the world with consciousness and call that the new ultimate reality, you're just creating another illusion. You're clinging to another idea. His point was that the mind is just as empty of a permanent self as the so-called matter it projects. So, where does that leave us? We're stuck in this incredible paradox, right? We've got one really powerful argument that says everything is a projection of consciousness. And we have another equally powerful argument that says consciousness itself is totally empty. How on earth can both of those be right? Well, believe it or not, a third school, the Tiantai, came along with this incredibly elegant solution. They didn't pick a side. Instead, they found this deeper middle way truth that actually manages to embrace both ideas. And they called it the Threefold Truth. So check this out. First, they accept the truth of emptiness. Yep, all things lack a fixed inherent self. Madhyamaka is totally right about that. Second, they accept the truth of provisional existence. I mean, even though they're empty, things clearly do appear to us. The world seems real. So Yogācāra is right about that too. But here's the mind-blowing part, the third step, the middle truth. It says that things can appear and exist and function in the world precisely because they are empty, because they're interconnected and not locked into some fixed state. This brings us to this incredible insight. Emptiness and appearance, they're not a contradiction. They are, as this amazing quote puts it,
interpenetrating facets of the same luminous suchness. They're two sides of the same coin. The world appears because it's empty, and its emptiness is revealed through its constant, vibrant, changing appearance. Okay, so cool ancient philosophical debate. But why does any of this matter for our original question about non-local consciousness today? Well, because it gives us an unbelievably sophisticated framework for how to even think about it.
This whole middle way perspective gives modern science a path that helps it avoid two giant pitfalls. First, it stops us from turning consciousness into some new magical eternal thing. But it also stops us from just reducing it to a meaningless chemical reaction in the brain. It suggests that consciousness isn't in your skull, and it isn't floating out in space somewhere. It is the dynamic, interconnected play of the world itself.
So if we take this idea all the way, if consciousness isn't something we have inside our heads, but it's the actual interplay of emptiness and appearance that is the entire universe, then what exactly is a single thought? That kind of reframes our whole place in the cosmos, doesn't it? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.